What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, talking about FTKs in Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel like this has become the hot button topic in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, and it's definitely one of the most discussed topics amongst the entire year in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, which is again why I am talking about this. Also, we have a ban list potentially looming that could drop as soon as 10 days, so I feel like, as I said in yesterday's video, it's a good time to talk about this and what cards could be potentially hit on the ban list so that we don't have to further live through this FTK format, especially going into 2019. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that right now it does kind of feel like we're in an FTK meta or an FTK format where obviously Danger Dark World is, well, I would say arguably the best deck. I'm not going to say like definitively, but I personally believe that it's the best deck. It's a deck that, you know, if you lose the die roll against it, you don't open up with any hand traps game one, you were almost certainly going to lose. That duel is a wash. And then in game two, and this is what really makes it kind of frustrating, it doesn't really matter what you do when you go first, whether you style on them, whether you do what your deck wants to do, whether you have to grind it out with them with floodgates or whatever, because if they open game three and they have something like Called by the Grave to maybe stop your hand trap or as a thought or whatever, maybe you don't even open up with a hand trap, then game two was just completely inconsequential and it's just going to be a run back of game one, and you're basically just going to lose, and everything that you amounted in game two just doesn't count for anything. So I feel like a lot of people are frustrated right now, and actually to that point, the reason that I think that more people are complaining about FTKs right now is because when you really think about it, and people have pointed this out, 2018, hasn't it kind of been like the year of the FTK in Yu-Gi-Oh? Obviously we're living through the Danger Dark World FTK right now, but go back to like the early portions of this year, YCS Atlanta in February. Obviously we had the Pendulum FTK, which you know, made the top cut at that event. We had the Gem Knight FTK, which also made the top cut at that event. So we had two FTKs, two very viable competitive FTKs earlier in the year, and now we have a completely different one later in the year, and Konami has done so many preemptive hits to try to address FTKs, and yet they still seem to just be popping up over and over again. So it's just making people feel really frustrated. I think that right now, if we would have never had the FTKs at the beginning of the year and this would all be happening in a vacuum, I don't think people's frustration would be nearly this high and people would be like, ah, this is the worst thing ever. But I kind of feel like it's justified because for the most part, this entire year has had some type of viable FTK. And the reason that I'm making this video is because obviously in yesterday's video I talked about all the cards that could be hit because of Firewall Dragon. I talked about the 5 big burn cards, you know, Cannon Soldier 2, Toon Cannon Soldier, Shadow Priestess of Ohm, and Amazoness Archer. Those are the cards that let you burn your opponent infinitely. And then I also talked about the infinite fodder cards, Grapha, Black Terra. Those are all cards that I feel like are on the table to be banned because of Firewall Dragon. I'm not going to go back into that. I don't think Firewall Dragon's getting hit, but those 5 plus 2, those 7 cards I feel like are all on the table to be potentially banned. But the thing is, I started thinking about this, right? And I think that I don't want to build a false sense of security, and I don't want a ban list to drop, you know, in 10 days, and maybe a lot of those cards are hit. Maybe Konami takes out all 5 of the burn cards. I don't want people to be like, yes, this is awesome. The FTK age is officially over in Yu-Gi-Oh! We don't have to worry about them, because I feel like there are a couple more FTK cards looming over the game that I don't want people to forget about. I don't want people to think just because the Firewall FTKs are dead that the FTKs are completely dead. And I want to talk about a couple of cards that I also believe need to be addressed. One of them I know for sure 100% needs to be banned, and then another one is a possibility. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about this card, but I think that the evidence is starting to mount to where it could be a problem. So first I want to talk about Gem Knight Lapis Lazuli. This is obviously the catalyst for the Gem Knight FTK, and let's just go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Konami tried to hit the Gem Knight FTK, but we all know that they did it in a very roundabout and I think just kind of asinine way. Instead of directly hitting the problem card, which is Gem Knight Lapis Lazuli, I've talked about all of this in the past ad nauseum just so many different times. So what Konami decided to do was they decided to limit Master Diamond. The problem with that was all the Gem Knight FTK players realized immediately, hey, that that doesn't actually kill our FTK, and we can definitely still pull it off. Maybe it won't be as consistent. Maybe we'll actually have to run a couple of different cards in the deck, but the play itself is definitely still possible. This is something that was actually brought to my attention fairly early on. What people were doing, at least in the duels that I saw, a lot of people were running Defusion. Defusion gave you the ability to basically summon Master Diamond multiple times, even with the card being limited. You would just use the effect, and then you would tag it back into your extra deck and then just summon it again. And my real beef with Lapis Lazuli really hasn't changed, and this is the reason that I think that the card should have been banned a long time ago. Number one, Lapis Lazuli to me has always felt like a fish out of water. If you look at her in the context of the Gem Knight archetype, I never thought that she actually made sense as a card. You know, Gem Knights are a beatdown archetype, whether it be in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V the show, or whether it be even in the fucking dual terminal lore, or how the deck was originally played. It's like a beatdown deck, but you know, she's this card that does random obscure burn damage, and she's the only burn damage card in the entire archetype. Like, she doesn't even make sense, and she really doesn't work that well with her own archetype, except sometimes you might need a little damage to push or to actually finish your opponent off, and she's kind of a good cheese card to go in for main phase 2. But overall, she doesn't embody the spirit of what Gem Knights want to do when she's like, you know, all the other cards are beatdown cards and she's like this random burn card. The other problem that I've had with Lapis Lazuli is the fact that, you know, she's been used in FTKs for basically forever. When I said that she could do, you know, huge amounts of burn damage, like 5,000 plus, you don't have to just actually run her in Gem Knight FTK. Well, I guess you could say the Black Garden versions of Gem Knights are kind of Gem Knight FTK, but it's a different version. Generally, you can run her in decks with Black Garden, and you special summon a ton. You force tokens on your opponent's side of the field with Black Garden, and her effect that does the burn damage doesn't actually account for, you know, special summon monsters just on your side of the field. She does damage according to the amount of special summon monsters that are anywhere on the field. So you can actually do like 5,000 damage with her, and then you go into Master Diamond and you end up winning the same way as you would with the Gem Knight FTK. My point is, we've seen her used in multiple FTKs, whether it be used exclusively in Gem Knights or and other hybrid decks. So I don't know, it just kind of feels like she's always been a card that's only been used for degenerative things, and their first hit to Master Diamond didn't really accomplish anything. We saw at YCS London the deck made top 32, and I don't care what anyone says, I think making top 32 at a YCS is incredibly difficult, especially when you gotta beat out, you know, 1,600 plus players, and you're talking about only a couple of wins from being in the top 8. So Gem Knight Lapis Lazuli is one card that I think that absolutely has to go. If Konami hits the other cards but they leave Lapis Lazuli alone, what's stopping people from just playing Gem Knight FTK at future events and kind of having the same effect that Danger Darkwood FTK is having in the game? And then the other card that I want to talk about is definitely going to feel like a random card. Some people are going to be mad. They're going to be like, Cap G, dislike squad assemble. I will dislike the hell out of this video, but it's definitely a card that causes FTKs, and I feel like people are starting to kind of catch on with this card. It's actually Red Eyes Flair Metal Dragon. Now, I know, again, it's going to sound kind of random because when I think of Red Eyes Flair Metal Dragon, it's actually a really niche card. I kind of understand what Konami was going for. It's supposed to be a card that, you know, just punishes your opponent for, I guess, just doing more in their turn than they necessarily need to. I've played it historically in the past in like Dark Magician, and really, you can put it in any deck that runs a lot of level 7 monsters. I guess you could run it in like Zephyra. You could use it in decks like Mermill. It's a card that's not a hard once per turn, but when you really think about it, it shouldn't actually need to be a hard once per turn, because for the most part, the amount of burn damage your opponent takes from Red Eyes Flair Metal Dragon is technically up to them. Like, what your opponent does kind of, you know, dictates how much burn damage they're going to take. Instead of activating a whole ton of cards, maybe they can just kind of play conservatively and they'll actually take less cards. It used to be a really good card for like closing out games, maybe not as close as like Cowboy, because the turn that you summon Cowboy, you just detach a material and you win. But Red Eyes would be a card where if your opponent was at like 1,500 life points, you summon Red Eyes and, you know, well, your opponent can only activate like a couple of cards at that point. Otherwise, they need to kill the damn Red Eyes first, or it's just going to burn them for game. The problem with Red Eyes Flair Metal Dragon is the fact that there are actually multiple infinite loops, and really these are, you know, plays that have ended up on my channel multiple times. These are not new loops at all. I'm talking about, you can go back in 2016 or so and you can find these duels on my channel, but people have now actually started playing these decks. I was watching watching a video on Pro Play Games, and one of these Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon FTKs actually ended up getting 17th place at a Jacksonville, Florida regional, and that raised my eyebrow because I was like, wait a minute. If people are playing this right now, and as far as I know, you really only need like Summon Sorceress to continue being legal for it to be a viable thing with the Galen duel play, maybe this could be something that actually ends up catching on. So if you guys don't know, Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, anytime your opponent tries to activate a card, or well, anytime they activate a card or they activate an effect, they end up taking 500 burn damage. So again, it shouldn't be something that needs to be a hard once per turn, because there's no real way of infinitely activating an effect. Even if there was, like if your opponent could infinitely activate an effect, why would they if they know they're going to burn themselves to death? That's something that they would not do. The thing is, you can actually force your opponent to infinitely activate effects, and that's what's happening with Galen Duel. You send Galen Duel to your opponent's side of the field with Summon Sorceress, and even though the Galen Duel's effect is technically negated, it will still attempt to constantly activate. And what happens is, as soon as your opponent takes burn damage, the Galen Duel tries to activate, even though it's negated because it's trying to destroy itself. The Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon will then burn them. Then the Galen Duel, while negated, still tries to activate again, and it causes an infinite loop, and your opponent will just burn to death at that point. Now, I know that there is another one with Bills, which is a little more difficult to do, but it is technically the same type of deal, where Bills and Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon will constantly activate each other infinitely, and your opponent will burn to death. Although I think the Bills one, like Bills has to be on your opponent's side of the field. I'm pretty sure using things like Sheehan Spy, somebody could probably come up with an FTK. And while some people might say, hey Cap, it was only a regional, it wasn't a YCS, and it didn't even make top 8, it's not that big of a deal. That is 100% true, but you also have to understand this was probably the first crack that anybody has really taken with this deck at a high level event. Also, you have to understand that the Link monster that you need to pull this off, that does the initial burn damage to start the infinite loop, it just got released in Soul Fusion. So it's not like, people have been trying this deck for months and months and months, and it's finally kind of broke through with a notable appearance. This is only the beginning, and it's like, who knows how consistent this deck is? Who knows if people can find better versions of it? I just know that Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon is a card that, while as obscure as it is, it does provide the ability to have infinite burn damage when you loop it with a couple of cards like Bills and Galen Duel, and with Summon Sorceress and stuff legal, you can definitely do it. And if it's gotten 2nd or 17th place at its first attempt, that's a little scary, even if it was just a regional, unless, I don't know, maybe there was only like 18 people at the event or something like that, then it's kind of cap and you don't have to worry about it. But I feel like it's a card that should be on people's radar, because who knows what other, versions and iterations of the deck that people might be able to come up with. As far as I can tell, I think that these are the two only cards, Galen Duel and Bills, that activate anytime that you take burn damage and that are not hard once per turn, so they can kind of keep activating, although Galen Duel has to be negated, otherwise it would just destroy itself. Bills does not. Bills will just keep activating infinitely with the Red Eye Flare Metal Dragon, and I just feel like it's a card that people need to kind of notice, and they need to at least consider that maybe it might need to be banned. I mean, it kind of sucks because I kind of like the card. I especially love the Ghost Rare art of the card, but the fact that it can be looped is a little concerning. So you guys let me know what you think. Do you guys believe that these cards should be hit in addition to the other ones that I talked about yesterday? Because I feel like the worst thing would be if Konami got rid of all the Cannon Soldier FTKs and then we were still left with a couple of other viable FTKs moving into 2019. Like, that would just be one of the most deflating things we could possibly have. But whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.